Okay, well, it's 11:30, and so let's go ahead and get started. Interesting times, as they say. What can I say about this? So, we're going to try to keep you busy. We're going to try to keep you engaged with the course, certainly. But I guess, um, appreciate if everybody's kind of patient about it, right? So, the best way to be patient, though, is to help each other out. Um, Communicate with me. Tell me what you need from me. You don't have to tell me your life story, of course, but what I'm asking for you to do during this time is to let me know how I can help, right? And so I'm going to also try to ask certain things of you to sort of help me get through this as well. So let's just be patient and. This is historic times. Well over 4,000 positive cases again yesterday. It's just extraordinary. So nobody knows what to do, right? So on we go. Okay, so today's day, like a normal day, right? We're just going to kind of go through the syllabus just a little bit and tell you sort of the mechanics of the course, how we're going to deliver it, certainly over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting. And then I'm going to lay out maybe some suggestions about how you can be active in the course. And so off we go. The basic quizzes and exams, right? So as you go through the syllabus, which is posted on Canvas, and I think it's completely up to date. That's what I've been doing the last couple of weeks is, working on these things. We were only notified just a very short while ago, right, that we were going to go online completely. So things are going to take time to sort of fix all the dots and arrows. But so let's just plan on the following. So over the course of the semester, there'll be up to 10 quizzes. They will be administered online via Canvas. And collectively, the quizzes amount to about 20% of your grade, right? So when you look through the syllabus, you'll see some descriptions about what you can expect with the quizzes. And so I encourage you to do that. The bulk of your grade, however, of course, is based on exams, how well you do with my exams. I've moved my exams onto Canvas regardless of whether we are meeting in person or online. Again, during this historic times, I've just found that this is the best thing possible. And so I give you a PDF copy of all the questions, and I give you something approximating a week to actually turn it in. But I ask you to turn the exam in via Canvas. So you can expect multiple choice questions. Some of them you've already experienced in the quizzes, right? Some of them will be based on short answers that we discuss in class, and some of them will be longer answers where I'm asking you to synthesize what you understand in new ways. Because it's a take-home, you'll have access to all kinds of resources, and so I designed the exam such that, if you just kind of Google your way through it, you're not going to do very well, all right? We all know that the internet is a wild, wild place, and information is not necessarily the best you can do. So what I'm asking you to do is, by all means, you need the textbook. We stick pretty close to the textbook in large sections of the course. My lectures, again, I'm topic-based, so I set you up each day with a series of questions, and we work our way through that. And the other point about the exams is that they're potentially cumulative in the sense that, obviously exam one is going to have some stuff from what I expect you to know from your first semester, right? And so we'll talk about this as we go forward, right? The first exam's not until something like week 4 or week 5, so we have some time. But you can't expect to get through a 300 level course having basically flushed all the information that you've gone before you, right? So this is the second semester of genetics, And so, of course, it's going to build on things that I expect you to already know. I will try to highlight those things as much as possible so that there won't be any gotcha kinds of questions, right? We'll talk about things, but you shouldn't, view like, oh, thank goodness I'm done with Mendel, Of course not, right? Mendel is a central theory. Mendelian genetics is a central theory that explains, in large part, a number of traits. Individual differences among us can be traceable to Mendelian genetics. So, of course, you need to know that. All right, so the other thing here is that Canvas has this horrible to-do function, and it just lists all kinds of things, and then it only has room, of course, to list a few at a time, and so it starts triaging. Anyway, so look, I communicate about what you need to do with the course through announcements. You can use the to-do as a guide, certainly, but it's not the principal guide. Our syllabus, our schedule, and my announcements are the way that we communicate about what you need to do. And besides, like I have this little point down here, right? Just doing assignments and the quizzes and the exams is not everything that's expected of you. You're expected to read, you're expected to follow up on work to do with databases and whatnot. So there's lots of things to do that don't necessarily get a grade. Okay, so the mechanics of course delivery. So what I'm trying to do is to provide you with a video, certainly, and then the idea is that we're supposed to be in class at 11:30 Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that's what I will do, is that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I'll flip on the switch and I will produce a video which you can view live through my YouTube channel, or of course you can watch it later. So I don't know if you recall from last semester, or not last, but last spring, when we went we left students to decide whether they wanted to come to class or to do it remotely. And so faculty were expected to deliver both in-person and live stream and recorded videos. And so this is what I ended up doing. And, to the extent it has some merit, we'll do the best we can, right? So at any rate, I'm not taking attendance about whether you watch it live stream or not. A little secret about learning, right? The more you see things, the more you hear things, the more you read things, the more repetition you get, the more you understand. So it's to your benefit to take advantage of this. In terms of scheduling, you're expected to be in class, right? So this is one way to do that. But yes, there'll be a video for you to watch later on if you wish. Okay? Chaminade has pronounced that we'll be back in person on the 31st of January, and I just say, we'll see. As I mentioned, yesterday's COVID counts were well over 4,000 again, and if you're paying attention, the key statistic to look at is the hospitalization rates and the number of people in the ICUs, and those numbers have started to climb again. Sort of there's a delay, right? So they report positive cases, and you have 2 to 3 weeks before, we can say that you've recovered and things are good to go. And so we shall see. As long as the case counts are as high as they are, I don't know what the plan is, but I'm optimistic, but I'm not counting on us being back in person the 31st of January. That would be a Monday, by the way. So what we'll do is we'll proceed to deliver the courses this way. 11:30 Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I will broadcast my lectures. Okay? So let's talk about participation. I don't like to do Zoom meetings with 15, 20, 30 people. I can barely pay attention to myself, let alone pay attention to up to 30 different screens and chats and all these things. It's like it's just too much to do without some help. But that said, we don't want to just sort of disappear, right? So I think what we're going to do, so we're going to set this up the first week, so you don't have anything to do this first week except for, again, look at the announcements. But what we'll do is I encourage you to get together in groups. And so Canvas allows you to set up groups for a variety of things. And basically we can think of this as sort of a study and maybe a working group. So what we'll do is you'll form your groups. Group size can be anywhere from 1 person up to 3 people, depending on how you want to work it. Okay, and then beginning next week, what I'll do is I will set up Zoom meetings with each group at the times that you guys can work with me, and I'll have posted some short questions to help you sort of manage the material that we've been covering, right? And so the idea would be that you have those questions in advance, then you work together in your own groups, probably, through your through Zoom or whatever mechanism that you are able to get together. It may just be through email, right? But what you'll need to do is to come up with sort of group answers to these questions. And that's sort of the minimum, right? So that's minimum expectations. We'll meet about once a week with our groups, and we'll share time with me, and then we'll discuss the stuff that we've covered. Okay. All right. So yeah, those are going to be mandatory. This participation part is going to be mandatory. If we're back in semester, then you'll have done this exercise just twice, right? So second week and the third week. We will continue this, and this is what I would do normally, right? So when we meet in class, it's like try to set it up time at least once a week where you get to work together on topics that I assign you or that I suggest for you to do during in person. So assuming we're back, maybe as early as 31 January, we'll continue to do this, but obviously the difference would be you'd be doing it in person during class time. Okay, I already mentioned this. I think I'm going to, the operative word here is going to be patience. In addition to figuring out how to do this remotely, right? The other thing that we have to deal with is we can't just copy over our Canvas courses from the last time we taught this, because if you recall, spring semester last year, we didn't start until February. So there's everything that I presented is revised for a 10-week period instead of the 16 weeks. So what I'm doing behind the scenes is I'm reworking schedules and timings. And it's easy enough to do on paper, but there's literally hundreds and hundreds of cross-checks that you have to do through Canvas to get it all to work in terms of the promptings and schedulings and timings. So that's what I'm saying. Certainly in the first week, pay attention to announcements. That's the stuff that I'm going to have you that's how I'm going to let you know what there are things to do. And you can think about this as really your only responsibilities this first week in terms of the course itself as figuring out what you're going to do with my YouTube stuff, right? How to get the lectures. And then the other is when you go on to Canvas, you'll see that there's a pretest. And I am asking you to take the pretest, this week, right? And so there's about 20 questions. I forget exactly how many. It's pass-fail in the sense that if you take it, you pass, and you'll get 5 points bonus just simply for taking the test. It's due by Friday midnight this week. It's called a pretest. Oops. Okay, so I want you to do your best, take your time, do your best, but this is an idea of seeing where you are largely with material from the first semester of genetics. Okay, so that's one thing to do, take the pretest. The other thing, of course, you should be doing is you should be reading chapter 1 out of your book, Genomes 4, right? Because that's where we're at. And if you look at the lecture schedule, we're covering material in the first chapter. Okay, so very quickly, let's just kind of give you an overview of what the course is about. And so the title is Genomics and Epigenetics. So let's just give you a couple of definitions to start you off. So genomics is the study of the structure, function, interaction, mapping, and evolution of genomes. And a missing word there is it says structure and function and interaction. So the way we study the genome is we recognize that there are sequences that we'll call DNA elements that we can recognize, that they show up repeatedly throughout the genome. So examples of DNA elements are regulatory sequences. An additional example are introns, exons, promoter sequences, etc., etc. So these are, of course, DNA sequences. We can recognize them when we search through the genome, and we know something about how they function. So genomics, in part, is mapping those different DNA elements and see how they interact. The second part of genomics is the idea of how did those DNA elements come to be? So why is the human genome structured the way it is? And you can't answer that unless you start appreciating the idea of evolution, that genomes have a history. Not only did we inherit our genomes from our parents, but our parents inherited them from their parents, and so on and so forth to the beginnings of time. All organisms, whether they're bacteria, archaebacteria, eukaryotes, have DNA as their genome, right? And so that's one of the basic pieces of evidence that suggests that all life on the planet Earth that's here today shares a common ancestor. And so you have to understand what's in your genome has a history. And so part of what we do throughout the semester is we talk about evolution. Okay? And the other part of the title reflects an exciting area of genetics, which is the idea that we understand to a certain extent that DNA sequences are immortal, right? The genome is passed down from generation to generation with some modification, but that's the part about us that's immortal. But during our lifetime, the phenotypes that we have are not only determined by the sequences that we have, but they're certainly determined also by the environment that we experience. Through development, certain environments need to be present in order for the phenotype to develop. And so an interesting mechanism of going from genotype to phenotype is called epigenetics. And this includes chemical modifications to DNA nucleotides that themselves become heritable if they occur in the germline, right? And so this is one way that we can understand how gene expression is sensitive to changes in environment, but it's also an interesting field of study to understand how we go from genotype to phenotype in development. Okay, so epigenetics is a mechanism of gene expression, and it's a relatively new topic in the field of genetics. So that's what the course is about, genomics and epigenetics. Okay, this is just graphs, images to sort of point out that, well, on the left we have our so-called super kingdoms, so eukaryotes, archaebacteria, and prokaryotes, right, or bacteria. And then the question should be, do we include viruses or not? So for this course, we are talking about viruses as non-living entities, right? That they contain proteins, DNA, and or RNA as their genome, but they don't have any metabolism. So therefore, that's why we consider them non-living. But clearly, viruses are a big part of the equation of what it means to be alive. We've spent the better part of 3 years dealing with viruses, right? So we will include, as part of our discussion this semester, we're going to bring in viral genomes as part of our experience. And here's the shocking thing, if you don't appreciate this, again, this is the history part. Our genome is filled with viruses. What do viruses do? Viruses get into your genome. whether they're DNA or RNA, their mechanism is so that they can then take over your machinery for making copies of themselves. Okay, they have to integrate into your genome. And so sometimes this can be passed from generation to generation. Humans, dogs, cats, you name it, right? And so viruses are a substantial part, viral genomes are a substantial part of our genome. So we have a lot to talk about, and I think it's pretty eye-opening. We'll go from sort of our high school understanding of what genomics is, it's the thing for genes, to understanding that there's just a lot more going on there. Okay, so a little bit to I will see you on Wednesday afternoon, 2:30, the same thing. We're going to be doing a video lecture to introduce the course. At some level, I'm going to be stalling things a little bit, so we'll be doing some online exercises and whatnot, thinking that we'll be back in person by week 4. Okay, so if case, then we'll be doing some wet labs. But I always have a substantial computer data bioinformatics component to the genomics lab. So in that sense, this won't be any different from what people prior to this semester have experienced in 308. All right. The other thing is that concepts that we talk about in lecture will show up in lab, and conversely, some of the things we talk about in lab we'll talk about in lecture. And so I use the two courses more than I do the first semester in genetics. First semester in genetics, I kind of keep the lab and lecture separate, but this time around, we work together. All right, and this will become more obvious as we proceed. Okay, as you're going through the Canvas site, there are links to sort of resources to help you. And so, the first thing is I want you to kind of look at the Canvas site and get a sense of what the organization is. I organize it basically in modules, and so you'll find modules for week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. Okay. You'll also find modules for resources and whatnot. So some other things. Look, we post our office hours as if that is going to work for everybody, right? So my office hours officially are 1:30 to 4:30, but I'm asking you to do meetings remotely, okay? Again, historic times. I'm substantially older than you are. We don't need to go into all the details and whatnot, but let's try to protect each other. And so the way I swing this is that being able to ask questions versus via messages is, if you get good at it, it's a really effective way of communicating, because it gives the person on the other end a chance to sort of gather some resources for you. When you come in to do a meeting and whatnot, it's sort of by scratch. And so, we'll work both ways. The other thing is, some of you have had me before, and I ask that you not, so this is old news, but I ask you not to send stuff to the Chaminade email. I get hundreds of emails a day. Very few of them are from my students. I'm not expecting you to communicate that way. That's where Canvas comes in. So please use the messaging. The advantage of the Canvas messaging is totally secure. Nobody else sees it between just you and me, right? And again, this being the old guy in the room, we're going to have to remind you, if I don't reply immediately to you, your response shouldn't be, send me another message about the same thing. Give me some time to return to you. So again, if you send a message to me at 7 o'clock on Friday, I'm not going to get back to you till sometime on Monday. Okay? All right. Let's see. We'll introduce again. Lots of resources online, so we'll be using a whole bunch of stuff from this NCBI. Okay, we'll also use Wikipedia quite a bit. It's a pretty good teaching thing, because some things are good and some things not so good. So it's good to point out what's limiting about that. Okay, and then some journals, open access to be aware of, are listed here. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about your book. Normally I'd say, oh yeah, go get an old edition. But the old edition, Genomes 3, was published a long time ago. So it is definitely antiquated. And genomics is one area where you really can't use old textbooks. Already the fourth edition is getting a little long in the tooth, but it's a good narration about the ideas that we're talking about what's in your genome and why is it there and how does it interact. I've used other books in this, and like so, for example, if you can get a copy of Introduction to Genomics, good, because it'll help you a lot learning bioinformatics. It's actually a terrible book about teaching you about what's in your genome, but it's a really good book for teaching you how to identify things in your genome. So it's not a bad thing to have on your shelf. And at this point, you can get copies, old copies that are pretty inexpensive. Okay, so recommended textbooks. This is the one you were supposed to have from 307, right? The first semester. If you sold it back or you no longer have the rent, that's okay. But again, the first exam is going to cover stuff that we covered from the first semester, and you really do need resources to help you with this. You can't just rely on searching through Google for that. So an alternative is to go pick up an older edition of this, like so for example the 11th edition. That'll cost you somewhere between 10 and 15 bucks. It's necessary, important to have it on the shelf. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to say, sneak onto campus, and if you go into Wessel Camper 120, there's a bookshelf, and you'll find one copy of Genomes 4 there. So if you do take it, please return it. But it is something that you guys could share while you're trying to figure out how to get your textbook. I checked Amazon prices. It's about 60 bucks new, but you can rent for about 30 bucks. So, and you get an ebook out of the deal. All right, so I don't know how funny this is. This is a pretty old comic, but so what if you don't have your textbook anymore? All right, should you worry, right? So this is an example of one of the questions out of the on the pretest. Now, I won't go through this, but this is definitely a question I would expect you to be able to do, having completed fall semester of genetics, right? Not only multiple choice, but explain why you answer something in a particular way. Notice that there's jargon terms, transition, transversion, missense, nonsense, etc. Yes, you're supposed to know these things by the end of your biology career, and so that's why it's part of the pretest. So here's another one, okay? Come on. Okay. So again, that's sort of my, should I worry if I don't have my old textbook? Well, again, you can figure out ways of getting around it, but these are the kinds of topics that I expect you to be able to understand. And to some extent, we will go through this again in the first few weeks of the semester, but having a reference book by your side would be a good idea. Okay, lab again. So, we'll talk about it on Wednesday at 11:30 to remind you. Okay, and so that is it. Okay, so I'm going to sign off, and that will be it. I will see you on Wednesday, and look for this to be posted in a few minutes. All right, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.